Hi, everyone. Welcome to First Mondays with the ASQ. I'm Leslie Davis. I'm the Special Events Director at St. Louis Public Radio, and we are really so glad to be back with the ASQ on a first Monday, even virtually. We miss welcoming you all into our building and being in person with our friends here from the Arianna String Quartet, but we're excited to be doing this, and we hope that you enjoy this virtual presentation. The quartet's going to try to make it as much like in person as possible. We'll take questions. You can put questions in the Q&A or comments in the chat, and we will be sending the questions to them so they can answer them along the way. I know that many of you are sustaining members of St. Louis Public Radio, and we're grateful for your support. That's how we manage to still bring you events even in really weird virtual times. We're doing lots of other events virtually. You can check them out on our website, stlpublicradio.org/events. We have our mini J School, mini journalism school coming up starting February 15th, and Best of Shorts with Cinema St. Louis, February 20th. So we hope you'll join us for those. And then every Monday for the next 4 months, we'll be doing First Mondays virtually with the Arianna String Quartet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to them.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you, be with you. We can't see you, but
we trust that you're there.
We feel your presence. And we're so thrilled to be back with you. We've missed you so much. We'll talk more about that as we go. I want to first just reintroduce to many of you, and if anybody is new, introduce the members of the Arianna Quartet. John Magrosso is our first violinist. Julia Sakharova is playing second violin. Joanna Mendoza, viola, and I'm Kurt Baldwin, cello. We're the faculty, the string faculty at University of Missouri St. Louis, and this is the 21st year the Arianna Quartet has been here in St. Louis at UMSL, and we feel so proud of what we've all built together, the quartet with the community in terms of bringing great repertoire into great spaces, and we thank you for everything that you've all done to help keep us going. We're thrilled to come to you tonight live from Joanna's beautiful apartment. And for anybody who's new to the First Mondays, just very briefly, the goal of this series of concerts is to present repertoire of every period from the string quartet canon of repertoire, but in a more informal setting, oftentimes with an interdisciplinary connection, and for you to feel free to ask questions. Any question is fair game, and the lovely thing about being virtual is if you want to get up and go get a glass of wine or go let the dog out, you can do that too. So we're thrilled to be back with a full slate of offerings this spring. In addition, as Leslie mentioned, to the First Mondays for February, March, April, and May, we're going to also be offering some concert evenings featuring one piece per evening, and so they're going to be fairly frequent, every few weeks, starting fairly soon, and we'll give you plenty of notice about that. These are going to be live at home with the ASQ, and we've each picked a piece that we want to revisit as a quartet and share with you, and so we'll be sharing more information about that soon. There are so many things to celebrate. I was thinking tonight about, in addition to just being back with you all, that we can celebrate it's 2021. 2020's gone, and I was thinking tonight on this cold night, we only have a few more weeks of cold weather, and it's going to get warm again, so we can look forward to that. Tonight we're featuring the Quartet in A minor, Opus 132 of Beethoven, and we've chosen this piece for a couple of reasons. The most important reason to us is really that we have such a strong connection to the music, and we feel that the music speaks very clearly to what we all feel as a society and individually right now because of what Beethoven went through during the composition of this piece. There's a story behind every piece of music, and you can get as specific as you want and as detailed as you want. Sometimes being a little general helps free the imagination, though, so you can own it for yourself. But the Opus 132 Quartet is full of adversity and loneliness, anxiety and angst, but that's countered by a sense of hope and beauty and strength and peace. And I think we all have felt that in our time of being away from one another, these various senses. Just to give you a little historical context before we start to play, Beethoven dedicated the last handful of years of his life to writing string quartets. He had turned almost completely inward in his personal life, and the string quartet became his sort of safe harbor. So Beethoven died in 1827, and this Opus 132 quartet was written from the fall of 1824 to the spring of 1825. And Beethoven was recovering from a very, very serious illness, and had kind of gone outside of Vienna to the countryside to kind of heal himself, and he found a lot of his healing through this piece. By the time he wrote these quartets, these late quartets, it's also important to know we're dealing with a master of the form, a master of ideas and his expressive powers, and he sculpts drama with the color of the music, how the music moves, and the textures, how he changes the textures of the quartet like no other composer. Especially in these last 5 quartets. If you're new to the term the late quartets, it's just 5 quartets. There's a sense of timelessness and music with no boundaries. In fact, the famous stories about Beethoven in these pieces are that the players for whom he was writing them came to him and actually complained that the music was too far out and not playable, and they feared that he kind of lost his, he was untethered. And he was very blunt with them. He would say things like, "Why should I care about you and your stupid violin?" Or there was another quote where he said, I'm writing not for you, but for a later time. And we were just rehearsing the other day this piece and talking to each other about the fact that this could very easily, at moments, be 20th century contemporary music, the way it's constructed and the way he uses dissonance and consonance. So the piece is structured in 5 movements, really, and we're gonna speak a little bit about each movement, but we want tonight to be also about the music, so that you can enjoy hearing Beethoven's voice more than ours. So the first movement of the A minor quartet is a sonata form movement, and we want to give you a few things to listen for that are striking. First, the opening of the piece, you'll hear a very clear 4-note motive in the cello. The cello introduces, and that moves through crawls through the other 3 voices of the quartet, and that 4-note motive, Beethoven changes the speed of it. He turns it upside down. He uses it as foreground material and background material, and it really serves as the backbone to the movement. The first theme, after a violin outburst, there's a dotted rhythm first theme that starts in the cello and then moves its way to the first violin. And that kind of rhythm, that dotted rhythm, that unsteady rhythm, gives the music this sense of anxiety and angst and turbulence. And that's countered by a second theme that you'll hear that's introduced in the second violin, and then moves through the other voices of the quartet. It's much more in a major key, much more bright and sunny. And so as you're listening, you can listen for the texture of the slow-moving music, that dotted rhythm, and then a much more sunny major second theme. The journey, really, of 132, Opus 132, is how Beethoven moves through these textures and the worlds that he takes us through in terms of color and with the sound. So here's the first movement of Beethoven Opus 132.
So how do you follow something like that? Well, for Beethoven, the sky's the limit with what he could do. Traditionally, the second movement and third movement are dance movements and slow movements. And sometimes after a first movement, there will be a slow movement and sometimes a dance movement. And in this case, Beethoven follows this turbulent first movement with a really gentle and lilting dance movement. So this is, we've just seen so much variety of material in Beethoven. So he actually really pares down his material in this movement. There's almost just one theme in the first part, the minuet part. It's always being reassembled and recombined in the quartet. So this is really part of his mastery as a composer, but it's almost like almost a kind of cubist composition where you see all of these fragments that are always assembled and reassembled. So it's like watching crystals forming or something like that. The way this theme is unfolded for us. The trio is almost a bit of a joke, actually, and it's sort of an outdoors movement as opposed to the more indoors, the minuet. The trio is really much more of a country dance, and it has a really neat little trick in it rhythmically that sort of sounds like the quartet keeps getting off and then getting back on and then getting off and getting back on. And if it's kind of a really amazing thing to look at, if you happen to be looking at the score and can follow along, you can see it. But if you just kind of allow yourself to tap your foot through this trio, and then I think you'll find some surprises. So here's and then we'll have a recap. We'll go back to the minuet. So we'll have a minuet, and then this country trio, and then again this sort of refined monothematic minuet. Hope you enjoy it.
next movement is really the movement that this quartet is best known for, and certainly one of the most famous in all quartet literature. It's one of Beethoven's most inward and personal movements. It speaks to the depths of his imagination and to his spirituality and relationship to God. Beethoven, in fact, gave it the title Song of Thanksgiving in the Lydian mode, offered to the divinity by a convalescent. So why the Lydian mode? According to one source, the Lydian mode was a scale developed by the Greeks to remedy fatigue of body and soul. But modes were used extensively in the medieval church music, in Gregorian chant. If you imagine the keys on a piano, the Lydian mode would be only white keys beginning on F. So it would sound like as opposed to F major, Lydian mode differs from F major by one note. When with F major, we hear it lead and resolve. Whereas the Lydian mode has one different note. It's like everything rises, right? And so what this does is it creates harmonies that are kind of luminous and celestial, kind of suspending the sound. There's very little tension and very little direction. So the piece alternates between two kinds of music, chorales and hymn-like tunes in the Lydian mode, which are prayerful sections. The music is very still, kind of dreamlike, kind of not of this earth. They alternate with uplifting sections, in Beethoven's words, feeling new strength. These sections begin with a breath of energy, stumbling back onto one's feet and finding playfulness and exuberance. In the margin of one of his sketches of this movement, Beethoven wrote, "Thank you for giving me back the strength to enjoy life." It's easy to live in a poetic world when talking about this movement, but it does a bit of a disservice to the masterful architecture that's embedded in it. For instance, the chorale hymn music at the beginning is so slow moving, almost trance-like. It's impossible to tell just by listening that these 3 minutes of music consist of 5 mathematically identical phrases, 12 half-note beats, until the last phrase, when the harmony shifts, we finally get that black key that transports us from the celestial Lydian mode to an earthly, joyful D major. Each return of the hymn section becomes more expressive, more intimate. Beethoven's direction to the quartet in the third and final section reads, "Play with the most deeply felt expression." It's also in this final intimate iteration of the hymn that we get the triumphant, ecstatic climax, a perfect example of the extremes Beethoven was known for. So we'll play the third movement and we'll revisit at the end.
hope that the scale and scope of that music translates through the microphone. We thought we would just take a second and talk just really briefly before there are a couple of questions that have come in just about from our own perspective playing the music. I turn it over to, how is it for you, Julia? Like as string quartet players, this piece is one of these things that if you touch this movement once in your life, you're a different musician. And the more times you get to experience it, I think in a way, this movement is a reason we're all drawn to play in a string quartet, but I wondered what
First
your
of all,
perspective about
from my perspective, and I think it's true for all of us, every time we play it, how many times we play this piece and this movement in particular, every time there's something new that you discover about yourself or about the world that we live in, or just about Beethoven's writing. You find, literally finding different harmonies or something that draws your sound, your ear into this harmony. And I'm actually very aware, the longer I play, how harmony is important for me, that harmonic language of a composer. Because if you give any melody to 10 different composers, it's the harmony that makes the language of the composer really stand out. And so I think that in the hands of Beethoven, you can't think of a better composer to give this chorale and this tune, to just organize it in such a way that every time you play it, or every time you listen to it, you find something new that you discover. That's probably the first thing that jumps to me playing.
Yeah, and it's that what Julia is saying and what Joanna said about this Lydian mode and the harmonies. There are times when the overtones, because of what Beethoven, the chemistry that he's created, are so they're so free and the sound is moving that the quartet begins to sound like a well-balanced organ. And that's sort of the way we envision his imagination being in the slow music, that there's sort of a choral organ.
And actually, his first job was as an organist. So it's very possible that I think he was always kind of chasing this massive sound and the gamut of resonance and everything from the most intimate to the most grand and resonant. Yeah.
For his day, he was probably the most experienced string quartet writer, and to have gone so far in his life of the 6 opus 18s and the opus 59s, which are monumental pieces, and the opus 74, 95, and then opus 130, 131, and then to get to this, and just to be able to do something completely different that he's never done before with quartets, just to create this real hollowed ground feeling. It just feels completely new, and yet is also so masterful. One of the things for me is the way he builds this up with sort of individuals coming in at different times, and then having the chorale happen, and then again this sort of dialogue. It's almost like individual voices that just melt into this consonance and into this journey together. And I think this is another reason that this piece for us as a quartet is so nourishing at this moment, because here we have sort of like coming together as individuals at first, and then being able to have this kind of unity that we're all craving so much in these times when we're isolated.
I think the music, every composer's music moves in a different way and breathes in a different way, and there's there's actually something that composers use, and they're these we call them hairpins or crescendo markings and diminuendos, and this Beethoven was meticulous about writing these symbols, and that really gives a feeling of inhale and exhale when you have this hairpin, this crescendo up and then back down. But one thing that Beethoven does too is he'll write a crescendo and then immediately
Takes it back.
It takes it back, and you feel like your heart just stopped for a second. And that's one of the most beautiful and expressive things that he does that gets me every time.
Yeah, and the music, we've talked in the first Mondays about how we don't feel that any of the music that we play, even if it's from 1824, is old music, because the moment you touch the instruments, the moment the instruments touch this music, it becomes vividly alive. And it's hard to put that into words, but I'm sure as audience goers to the symphony and to our concerts and many other concerts, you've experienced music where you thought you knew it, and then you heard it live, and then it went through you, and you realized you didn't really know it yet. And that's how we feel every time we play it. Every time John begins the slow movement and my colleagues stack up, one of my favorite moments is just letting the cello come up underneath that, and the glow of that sound, and then we're together and we move through that chorale. It's an incredible experience to be on the inside of it. We feel it's kind of selfish of us to program this, but it's as John mentioned, we took many months apart to be safe when COVID first happened, and when we came back together, it was a very moving experience for us to make sound together, because we tried to do it online, and we just it doesn't work, and so we can't wait to be back live and in person. There are a couple of questions here. There's a question there's a 7th grader, Jessica Raj, watching. I hope I pronounced your name right, Jessica. She said that she started playing the violin in 3rd grade, and now she's in 7th grade, and she wants to know when we started. And we're very old. You know, I'll say that, Jessica, if you started in 3rd grade and you're in St. Louis, you're doing well, because the string programs in St. Louis are among the best in the country, and I'm sure I didn't start playing the cello until I was in 7th grade, and Joanna was in 5th grade playing the viola. These guys started a little.
Yeah,
I was in 1st grade, I guess you would consider.
we were a little younger, but really it's a great time to start in 3rd grade, and you'll have plenty of time and such a wonderful journey ahead of you with music, and I hope that one day it's almost like the best thing I can wish for you is that you get to play this piece with 3 wonderful colleagues someday.
Also, if you are thinking of how to maybe learn something faster, I would also recommend, if you're not playing piano, maybe do a little bit of that. That always helps to include that into your learning, because there's some things that you can do on the piano that's easier about harmony or rhythm that you can do.
It's also important to know that your learning never stops. Every time we rehearse, we talk to each other about things we're discovering about how to learn faster, how to be more efficient, and you know, really learning one of these instruments is about learning who you are as a person, and then learning how you solve problems and what you hear and what you see. And so it's a great academic resource. No matter what you do with your life, keep playing music, because it'll make you a great musician, but it'll also make you good at many other things.
Yes.
And if you ever don't feel like practicing, that's totally normal.
Just call us.
Join the
Yeah.
club.
We're probably having a cup of coffee trying not to go practice. Yeah. There's another question here. It's interesting. In what ways are today's instruments different from those of Beethoven's time, and how would that have affected, if at all, the sound that we hear now as opposed to then?
Well, I think at that time already we're getting into classical period, and there are actually instruments are made. Stradivarius was already making instruments, and the instruments that we have now been already starting to be used. I mean, there's a big span of the time, you know, Baroque and classical. There's still instruments that are being played, and there's transitional instruments, and both are Baroque and classical. And so I think it's fascinating to know, like, if you really are interested in Baroque, like, or period instruments, you should definitely check out how it was done, because there's great resources now that we have. But I think, you know, it's more important, actually, if it's convincing your message, like, no matter what instrument, like what style of instrument you're playing, if you're trying to convince something with the idea, then you look for that. But it is helpful to know, to me.
But they would have had I mean,
Nate?
you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
well, I think that one thing that's different about the instruments now than then is that the instruments that we have these days, because of some of the modifications, they're much more reliable. You know, I think that
The strings.
you know, when
themselves.
when we played this movement, we were able to really blend our sounds and really control our sounds, I think, much better than on the instruments of that day that they would have been able to use. Our bows are slightly different, and just we have a little bit more strength to sustain the sound than they would have had, I think. I think that a lot of it would have been similar, and a very famous comment is that throughout history, great string playing has always been kind of similar, and it's just the bad habits that are different. So, so I think that Beethoven probably didn't get to hear or didn't get to experience this piece in the you know, of course, his experience was really in his imagination. But I think that audiences of his day, I should say, wouldn't have gotten to experience the fullness and the richness, I think. I think there have been some changes in the cello, mainly to kind of enhance the sound and make it stronger, bassier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that the cellist wouldn't have been playing with an end pin. The strings would have been gut, and it wouldn't have had as much resonance. I think the other advantage that we have is that we have a tradition of string quartet playing that the four of us we were raised in. So our teachers were the Juilliard Quartet and the Guarneri Quartet and the Tokyo Quartet and the Vermeer Quartet and the Kolisch Quartet, and we have connections that are not that far away from Beethoven and the sort of tradition of interpreting this music, because when he was done with these pieces and he handed them off to the quartet to play, it's been up to us to really make the most, find their potential, and we're still not there. Any quartet player will tell you if you name one of these pieces, they'll basically, if you have a question about it, they'll kind of look at you like, well, how long do you have? How long do you want to talk about it? Because there are so many ways to tune them, to pace them, to shape them, and so the combination of the reliability of the instruments, the knowledge that we feel fortunate to have had, and then our experimentation is something that we're always working on. Yeah. So we should go on. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Okay, so the journey continues. Now we have this last movement. Beethoven marks attacca, which means without stop. There are two, one could say one movement is kind of, but they're so different that you would think of them as sometimes two movements because they're very different in character and emotional take, followed by the last movement, which is Allegro appassionato. The first movement that we're going to play is Alla marcia assai vivaci, and it's very short and brief. It's sort of like he's, walked out, and we were talking about the other night. He walked out, and there's a marching band going by, and it starts like a march, but then quickly sort of forgets about this idea, and he starts again, and then he forgets about it, and kind of a dancey and short, immediately followed by this very, I would say, powerful recitative. And to me, sounds like an operatic movement, very much. And I think Beethoven in his later life was really adamant about being spoken, because I think part of it, because he couldn't hear anything at that point. I mean, there was no sound coming to him. And that feeling of needing to be heard, translated into need of talking through music. And so we hear this recitative played by first violin and accompanied, sort of an orchestral accompaniment by us, that quickly goes into the last movement, which is very internal, at times vulnerable, and at times stormy, and finishes off kind of pleasantly and sort of, Beethoven humoristic way, kind of resembling of Haydn.
Very
almost.
triumphant at the end.
Yeah,
So,
I think so too.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here are the last three movements together of Opus 132.
Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. We hope the sound worked. If you have any
We hope
feedback,
you heard something.
yeah, if you have any feedback for us about this presentation in terms of like the setting and the acoustics, please
Sure.
reach out to us. ariannaquartet@gmail.com is an easy way to get to us. And as our lovely colleague Leslie Davis at KWMU mentioned, we will be back for more First Mondays, first Monday of March, April, and May. And we will also be in touch with you soon about what would have been our Two Hills series, which will now be a home series featuring great repertoire, and we'll be sending out email blasts about that coming up. So thank you all for coming, and everybody stay healthy and stay happy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.